Carole Landis is primarily known as the blonde movie star who killed herself for Rex Harrison. Of all the fools who have made women jump to the top, the idea of killing yourself for a tool like Sexy Rexy seems particularly silly. But one of the most glamorous and popular stars in Hollywood's golden years actually did take her own life for that Doolittle douche. Not many people today have heard of Carole Landis, but her story is one of Hollywood's most fascinating tales, with more twists and turns than her alluring curves can tell. Carole's story begins with a steady stream of heartbreaking details in the horrors of Midwestern Gothic, which we'll tell you in this video. She was born Frances Ridd's Day in the aptly named town of Fairchild, Wisconsin, on New Year's Day in 1919. They were the daughters of a farmer and a drifting railroad mechanic, who abandoned the family before little Carole was born. A drifting railroad mechanic was not a stable family man? What a surprise! Her mother was no saint either. Charles Fenner, her second husband, and the man with whom she had an adulterous affair, was likely Landis' biological father. The youngest of 5 children, 2 of whom died in infancy, her early years were filled with poverty and sexual abuse. Carole was such a beautiful infant that she earned the nickname Baby Doll. According to family sources, she was sexually abused by a relative for much of her childhood. Given the poor start to young Baby Doll's life, it's no surprise that Carole, 1, looked much older than her age, and 2, aspired to be in show business. Little Carole decorated her walls with pictures cut out of magazines of movie stars like Mary Astor and Clark Gable. At the age of 9, little Carole climbed on stage during a local talent show and began singing. Using makeup tricks to hide her age, she began participating in beauty contests at the tender age of 12. She won silk socks and an electric heater. Who says beauty can't buy you anything? In high school, Landis often skipped class. Boy crazy was the general consensus. I always seemed so much older than the other kids my age, said Carole. They seemed like tots. She was ahead of her classmates and ahead of her time. As a teenager, she tried to form an all-female football team at school, but the principal stopped her because it was unladylike. It's not surprising that Carole dropped out of high school at 15 to get her whole showbiz thing underway. She worked as a hula dancer in a San Francisco nightclub, she sang with a dance band, and she worked at a hamburger stand, a department store, a movie theater. She dyed her hair blonde and changed her name to Carole Landis, after her favorite actress, Carole Lombard. She eventually saved up $100 and hightailed it to Hollywood. Her 1937 film debut was as an extra in the original film version of A Star is Born. Next, she found herself in various horse operas and an untold number of cheesecake photos. Eventually, her cheesecakery paid off big. In 1940, studio head Hal Roach cast her as a scantily clad cave girl in the original film version of 1 Million BC. Just as it would for Raquel Welch a quarter-century later, the movie made Landis a star. Soon, just as Clara Bow had been dubbed the It Girl, and in Sheridan was crowned the Oomph Girl, publicists gave Carole the title the Ping Girl. The Ping Girl moniker was attributed to a takeoff on the popular motor oil ad at the time that claimed to take the ping out of an engine and make it purr. Some claimed it was a mashup of Pin-Up Girl. Some say it alludes to Carole's erection-generating abilities, as in, I saw her and ping. Miss Hard-On of 1940 may have very well been aware of this etymology. Once in an interview, Landis said ping was a term in Hollywood slang, but neglected to mention for what. Most interesting to me about the whole Ping Girl thing was how brilliantly Carole, or possibly her PR folks, leveraged being against the sobriquet. I want a fair chance to prove myself something more than a curvaceous cutie. I want to get out of bathing suits and into something more substantial. Unfortunately, the publicity department of my studio does not agree. They have conceived the brilliant idea of selling me to the public as the Ping Girl. This flash of genius is to be illustrated with a series of pictures out of their files, suggestive of anything but acting talent. Still, Landis was well aware that being pin-uppity had been her ticket to the big time. Leg art did the trick, naughty leg art, if you happen to look at it in that light. When the boys needed someone to pose in a skin-tight white bathing suit, go sleigh riding in shorts, or climb a ladder in a skirt, they'd yell, "Get Landis." That made everybody happy except, maybe, the goody-goods and the blue-noses, and I suspect they took a second peek now and then. Like a lot of women, Carole had a lot of ambivalence about using her assets to get ahead. She posed for cheesecake photos by the thousands, but then resented all the attention they garnered. Heaven knows I want people to think I have sex appeal. But I also want to think I have something besides sex appeal. God knows Carole was a smart cookie in every sense of the word. She loved to read and was a fan of Ernest Hemingway, Noel Coward, and W. Somerset Maugham. Hemingway gifted her with a set of personally autographed books. But it was Landis's more physical charms that got her places, both on and off screen. She scored a contract with 20th Century Fox and was involved with studio head 𝐑𝐞𝐬𝐮𝐥𝐭𝐬, though it's not entirely clear to me which came first, the chicken or the egg. She was in a series of successful films, playing second fiddle to Betty Grable in I Wake Up Screaming and Moon Over Miami. But she lost a pivotal role that ended up thrusting Rita Hayworth into stardom in the soapy bullfighter pick, Blood and Sand, very likely because she ended her affair with Zanuck. In fact, her ditching Daryl got her relegated to be pictures at the studio from then on. When World War II came along, Carole traveled more than 125,000 miles, spending more time visiting troops than any other actress. Dedicated herself to the war effort, taking time off from her career to tour the country selling war bonds and entertain soldiers all over the world: Australia, Brazil, Algeria, Bermuda, Scotland, England, New Guinea, Ireland, Guam, and New Zealand. She sang and jitterbugged with the boys, spent time visiting wounded soldiers, and wrote hundreds of letters to their families. Jack Benny said, "You soon forgot she was Carole Landis, the sex symbol, the Hollywood star, because she was a real human being and had a warm heart that spilled over with kindness." In conjunction with her ability to make privates' parts go ping, this no doubt added to her pin-up popularity with servicemen. During a 2-month tour of the South Pacific, Carole contracted malaria and amoebic dysentery. She almost died and was hospitalized for weeks, never fully recovering from her illnesses. Landis became an air raid warden, a commander in the Aerial Nurses Corps, and an honorary colonel in the American Legion. Our girl even got her pilot's license and eventually flew for the Civilian Air Patrol. She went on to write several newspaper and magazine articles about her experiences during the war, culminating in the 1944 book, later made in. She was quite the trooper, but despite the ping and pin-up, Carole never made it to the top. The closest she ever got to an Oscar is when, as a presenter at the 1941 ceremony, she caused a commotion when the slip fell out of her dress. I told you she was a smart cookie. She did make it to Broadway, however, working with Jacqueline Suzanne in the 1945 musical fittingly titled, A Lady Says Yes. In fact, Jacqueline and Carole said yes to Sappho. The two were lovers. In fact, the character of Jennifer North in Jacqueline Suzanne's infamous 1966 novel Valley of the Dolls was based on our baby doll. Let me tell you this. Every girl in the world wants to find the right man, someone who is sympathetic and understanding and helpful and strong, someone she can love madly. Actresses are no exception. The glamour and the tinsel, the fame and the money mean very little if there is hurt in the heart. Carole just never got a break on the romantic front. Abandoned by both her stepfather and father, she spent most of her life desperately searching for a daddy. The boy crazy teen grew up to be crazy when it came to men. And I guess women, let's not forget Miss Suzanne. In 1934, 15-year-old Landis married her 19-year-old neighbor, Irving Wheeler. The marriage was annulled a month later, but after 6 months they remarried. But they were divorced less than 4 years later when Irving named infamous director-choreographer Busby Berkeley in an alienation of affections lawsuit. Busby ended up proposing to Carole a year later, then broke it off. She went on marry yacht broker Willis Hunt, Jr., but ended up leaving him after 2 months. She said he was sarcastic. I shudder to think what shitty behavior came under that seemingly innocuous umbrella. While touring for the troops, she met and married Army Air Corps Captain Thomas Wallace in London, divorcing him a couple of years later. In 1945, Landis married the extraordinarily named Broadway producer W. Horace Schmidlap, but this marriage also only lasted a few years. Glamour girls are suckers. You might rightly hail me, hi sucker. Because as the nicks on a gun indicate how many men a killer has got, nicks on the heart of a glamour girl indicate how many men she didn't get. There is very little I can do about it, either. Being a glamour girl doesn't help any. I can only do what other girls do, cry my eyes out at night, hope and pray, pretend I don't care, do the best acting job of my career for the benefit of friends and family for the sake of my own pride. A psychic once warned Carole that she must beware of emotional entanglements with men you can't entirely possess. If only she'd heeded that warning. You are probably most aware of actor Rex Harrison for his roles in My Fair Lady, Cleopatra, and Dr. Dolittle. He came to Hollywood in the mid-40s and was almost immediately dubbed Sexy Rexy, due to his philandering ways and the apparent hotness that made the fair ladies drop like flies. Sadly, one of those ladies was our poor baby doll. Married at the time to his second wife, actress Lily Palmer, Rex broke Carole's heart when he wouldn't get a divorce. Of his many marriages, Harrison said, "Wives are like gilt-edged stocks. The more you have, the greater your dividends." Someone commits suicide every 14 minutes. Killing oneself is not uncommon. There are a lot of reasons people commit suicide, but for me it really boils down to one: a painful hopelessness that things won't get better. Maybe that's why it seems particularly tragic when someone with so much to give and look forward to snuffs out her life. It's so final, but the pain of heartache and loss can be hard to bear, and it can make sad and desperate girls do sad and desperate things. Born on New Year's Day, Carole died on Independence Day, 1948. She was only 29. She spent her final night in this earth with Dr. 𝐐𝐬𝐿, and the next day he was the one to discover her dead body on the bathroom floor. Harrison waited several hours before he called a doctor and the police. When the police arrived, he insisted he was just friends with Carole. According to some sources, Landis left 2 suicide notes, one for her mother and the second for Harrison, who instructed his lawyers to destroy it. During a coroner's inquest, Harrison denied knowing of any motive for her suicide and of the existence of a second suicide note. Carole was interred in Hollywood's Forest Lawn Cemetery. The stars at her funeral included Van Johnson, Cesar Romero, Pat O'Brien, Rex Harrison, and his wife. Watch the rest of this video in part 2.